December 8th, 1971 was a defining moment in American history, a time when the gangs of New York laid down their weapons and redirected their youthful energy towards the creative arts. Arts that would eventually become the foundation of what we now know as hip-hop. This is an American story. This is the American story.
Check out Can You Dig It, starring Chuck D. Available on Audible.
Can you dig it?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. So my name is Dr. Imani Kai Johnson, and I want to start by saying thank you to the Grammy Museum. It is an honor to be included and in their celebration of hip hop in the last 50 years. And so this is an incredible achievement. It's a pleasure to be here. Our panelists for today include 6-time Grammy-nominated Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Chuck D of Public Enemy. Also, Can You Dig It EP and narrator. Next to him is Lori Bula, president and founder of Soul Kitchen, and executive producer of the podcast, as well as Chuck D's manager. And the creators of the podcast, Pete Chalela, Brian Master.
Let's go, people, let's go.
And Julian Vologe. So thank you all for being here. It's going to be a tight hour, and we're going to cover 3 main parts, just talking about the last 50 years of hip hop, the making of and the impact of the podcast, and what we see things going in the future. So if y'all are ready to get started, first question goes to you, Mr. Chuck D. So how did you approach this year of celebrating the last 50 years of hip hop? How do you even begin to approach that? Someone like you who's definitely going to get called on a lot. What came up for you?
Well, first of all, it feels great to be back in this room. I've been in this room quite a few times. This is a 15th anniversary of this museum and unbelievable facility of the Grammys, and I try to tell as many people as possible to stop by, say hello, and check it out. They're always doing great events such as this and greater, great displays and curation. So thanks a lot for Jason for showing us and the crew. But this started really, this lady right here, I offered a challenge to her, Lori Bula, who's from the Bronx. And usually she gives, a little bit too much of her damn Bronx stories.
Thank you for that.
And then she says, hey, look, I got, basically I told her 2 years ago, I said, we're getting, into 2020, and we're going to enter that 50th year of hip hop soon. This is like 47 or 48th year hip hop. I'm like, we got to make something, we got to make importance greater, if not greater than popularity. And we got to be able to be part of the things that tell the story. So we did the Fight the Power 4-part documentary series on PBS and BBC that did a archaeological, forensic, detailed expose of what led into hip hop. And this was pretty much alongside the same time in Hip Hop 49 and at that curve, where she could tell you more than that this story of what happened before hip hop was woven into what she already was working on, the film. And when it came up, it was like, well, Chuck, I got some more Bronx shit for you. I'm like, oh, here we go again. And that's when, this came across the table. They'll be a lot more clearer than I am. But in meeting this crew behind me, I mean, they're like Fenway Park bleachers or something, right?
That's right, boy, that's right.
But, and meeting Pete and Brian Masters and Julian over the phone and over the Zoom, they'll get to tell you more about it. But, yeah, meeting Pete, who's basically Flavor Flav to to Brian
Let's
Masters.
do this.
So, and then it was a match made in what do you call it? No, the match made in Fort Apache.
Yeah, so the just to sort of pick up what Chuck was saying, this project came to us, and you guys were in your early stages, and I already knew the story of Black Benji and Yellow Benji, having grown up in the South Bronx at that time, which is weird because I'm only 29. But anyway, and so it just seemed like a natural fit because of what we were already working on, as Chuck said, and Chuck has had to suffer through many Bronx stories. There will be more. And then so then we got hooked up with these guys, and it seemed like a natural fit. But more importantly, it was a really important story that most people just have a very sort of glossed over Hollywood opinion of, or people think of the Warriors, which is sort of a very fantasized version of it and not completely accurate, but is certainly a great gateway drug to what actually happened, which is how I look at it.
So how did you end up connected with Can You Dig It? Did they come to you? Did you cross paths?
Oh, we had a mutual friend who brought us together.
Yeah, CAA.
I thought it would sound less douchey to not say CAA, but leave it to the Flavor Flav of the group to bring it full circle. Not that there's anything wrong with CAA; they are friends and family. But it came more not even with she didn't even as much have her agent hat on. She knew what we were doing. She knew our background. She knew who I was. She had already been watching all of the roughs for Fight the Power, How Hip Hop Changed the World, which we had actually made with the BBC, just because I cold called them, because that's how I am. But anyway, and it just was a natural fit. It made sense. Like Chuck was saying, it was almost like the story before our story, even though we had sort of touched a little bit on gangs.
Okay. And how did you feel when you first heard the pitch for the podcast? For both of you.
I mean, I thought the pitch was fine, but it wasn't until I actually spoke to them. I'm sort of one of those people, like, whenever I hear a pitch, I think of The Player. If you guys have ever seen that movie, it's a great movie with Tim Robbins in the early 90s. It's always like, and so we're going to frame it here, and then we're going to do something that's like this thing meets that thing, and it's like Superman meets, whatever. Not that their pitch was like that. I mean, they had a great deck.
Oh, okay.
But all pitches, I just meant all pitches are a little bit, it was more about talking to the guys.
No, she was really testing who we knew. I think you really
to see
wanted
if it
to
was
see like it's
authentic.
not bullshit. I mean, that's really
and
what it was.
And for the record, it was Sons of Anarchy meets Welcome Back, Kotter. That was.
Yeah, it was one of those things where my job is always to make sure that history don't be a mystery, and clear the mythology, especially in this this is such a information yet misinformation age, where so many people today listen with their eyes and they don't even listen with their ears the same way humans did last century. So when this came up as being like an audio offering, I was still like, okay, really? Wow, okay. No visuals? Okay, but we already had the visuals in Fight the Power. This went into the gristle of the reason why even the Fight the Power formed. So it was a perfect fit, I thought.
Cool. So what then goes into, I have a clear understanding of why this podcast, but what goes into deciding even how to curate your year of celebrating the last 50 years of hip hop? So how do you decide what?
Well, these things had to form. I mean, I'm 63, so when all this was forming in 73 or 71, 72, I was old enough to be aware that this thing was happening somewhere over there in the Bronx. I'm from Long Island and Queens, so what it did is it cleared up a lot of regional mystery. My parents are from Harlem, so the Bronx was just always over there with cousins that couldn't live in Harlem, but it was cheaper to live in the Bronx. But we're talking the 60s. And something happened to the Bronx going from the 60s into the 70s. See, the Bronx in the 60s, I remember being like, sort of like Queens, but like sort of like Harlem in between. And then by the 70s, it turned into neither like Harlem, nothing like Queens, into this own thing that, yeah, I got some relatives over there, but I hate going there. And and so a lot of the things start to make sense of okay, but this is evolving out of a place that was left for dead. And the President of the United States even said in 1974, F New York, and especially the Bronx, Leave It for Dead. Then later on, trying to answer up and try to cover that up, Reagan comes to the Bronx. But we're talking about something that led up into the decay of an area where it was left for dead and further squandered, that the people there were picking up the pieces. Not the administration, not the city. Everybody had jetted out of the Bronx of taking care of the community or being able to rebuild the community when we talk about the documented destruction of the Bronx by Robert Moses's Cross Bronx Expressway. It wasn't that blatant and clear, but the after effects, and then post-Vietnam, and it's just a lot of things snowballed. And when I actually had the first conversation with Pete after everything started, the ball started rolling, this guy, you swear, he was like, play-by-play for every motion and activity in the Bronx at that particular time, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So Pete, tell us what Can You Dig It is about.
First of all, it's amazing to be on the stage with you guys. So I just want to simmer in that. And I want to thank everyone else for coming down to Fiery 10 to be here tonight, because this is crazy out there, but it's beautiful in here. Like Chuck said, this is an incredible oasis to the past. And that's what the story's all about. And I think, we are celebrating Hip Hop's 50 with you guys here. There's an exhibit on the 4th floor, which is 5,000 square feet of culture. And I'm looking around there. I see Humpty's nose. I see Biggie's, big freaking peacoat. Eminem's, Robin costume. And you got the shell toes. Like, I'm thinking to myself, these are achievements of major, major accomplishment. These are artifacts of something that happened against all the odds. These aren't just like cool things to have. These are examples of overcoming a lot of adversity. And that's what the story is all about. I mean, hip hop is the greatest underdog story of all time, because you go back to the Bronx in 1971 and you think about the violence that was happening, and there's 15,000 kids 80 blocks north of Tiffany's, right, living on the street, living by the code. The city says F you, basically, and everyone was paying dues, but the Bronx paid the biggest dues. And we take the story back to urban decay, we take it back to policy, we take it back to urban planning. Go to Robert Moses. He decides to carve, 6-lane highway down a borough for the first time ever, displacing communities. And those who were displaced were the lucky ones, because there was policies in place where you could discriminate against who could buy a house and who can get a loan. So if you couldn't get a loan or get a house, you were stuck in the Bronx while the thing burned. Okay? So I call it an underdog story because we're sitting here celebrating hip-hop after 50 years. It happened because these kids made a decision on their own to change their lives. And by doing so, they've changed the world. And that's remarkable to me. And that was the passion behind this story to get told. And, Black Benji was the gang member of the Ghetto Brothers who was murdered on a peace mission. And his family has been forgotten, and they have been on a mission to basically just get his name into the zeitgeist. And I'm going to stand up for a second, because our global artwork has his name on the cover of it. It's amazing. We're on Morning Joe together. He's saying his name on Morning Joe National News. So mission accomplished right there. And on top of that, it's a damn good story, man. It's a damn good story. And so that's the story. It's about outlaw culture turning into hip-hop culture.
And how did the three of you team up to tell this story via this podcast?
Yeah, this also is like, for me as a middle-aged father from, the suburbs of New York, my game's not over yet. I'm trying to create another chapter. And I want to show my kids that, it doesn't matter how old you are, work's work, ideas are ideas, and it's hard, and when you finally get what you wish, then the shit gets even harder. And so we met up during the pandemic because there was this dearth of hope happening. And if you remember the early days of shelter in place, people were betting against New York. I'm like, what is going on here? There's so much history to pull from to find hope. So we decided to go back into the past. We put together the story, which I actually pitched 8 years ago as a TV show, got denied. But we came together during the pandemic. I'm the Flavor Flav, like Chuck was saying. I'm the spaz, right? This guy's a composer and an audio guy. And then Julian I met because he catfished me when I actually hit up Yellow Benji, who's now dead, on Facebook because I wanted to tell his story. He wrote me back because Julian is his proxy. So we had access to the family, right? Access to the story, and then the skills to get it done and the passion to drive it through. So.
And then thinking about Audible greenlighting this podcast and the unique approach of it all together, like how did that come together, do you think? What prompts getting greenlit for this?
Hard work, timing, luck, right? Positive energy, a bunch of no's. And then obviously the timing was Hip Hop 50. The timing was Lori looking for certain things. And also the timing was Audible having to program a lot of things. And, there was a lot of content out there that was great on Hip Hop 50. Not one other piece of content covers this story. And that was also cool. And then we wanted to decide, again, we're creators. We try to be innovators. And Audible's the same. They are the HBO for your ears. And we brought them something unique that they wanted to push the limits with.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the podcast a bit. It is an incredible mix of acting, intimate stories from the voices of people who were either there or related to folks who were there. I know I was impressed when I heard Black Benji's niece, Angelique Nixon, speak,
That's right.
or the episode where you get to hear from Coke LaRock, like that. These are unexpected voices. So how do you bring something like this together, the mix of acting and narration and storytelling and interviews?
Yeah. So I had a lot of experience producing and composing in scripted audio. To my knowledge, there wasn't anything out there. It was quite like what we had envisioned in nonfiction, where we're using audio as a medium to retell actual true historical events through a blend of all those things: scripted sequences that sound like a movie, narration, exclusive conversations, archival footage, things like that. So we kind of landed on this pretty unique new format. We call it an audio docudrama. So it's part history lesson, part movie for your ears. So it's the aim is to be educational but also entertaining at the same time. So that's where we came at, from a format. We knew that we had to do something that was unique and stand out. As Pete said, the content ecosystem is already a massively saturated thing. And when you go deeper into audio, massively cluttered as well, take a double click into that, we're Hip Hop 50 content. We knew we were competing for, the attention, eyes, and ears within that sea. And to Pete's point, nobody else was telling this amazing origin story. So we knew that the story itself would do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of making it stand out, making it unique, making it untraditional. But we also had to back that up by sort of up-leveling the presentation and the packaging of the listening experience.
Thank you. And Julian, how do you get access to those folks? How do you find them? People are...
Well, I mean, so maybe the origin story is really going back like some more than 15 years now. So I totally started totally different. I was working on a photo series on Jewish diversity, and someone told me about this former Puerto Rican Jewish gang leader from the Bronx. I tracked down his phone number, and so I connected to actually his wife. He didn't even have a cell phone that he was using as well, so it was always through his wife.
Phone?
Yeah, so we met up in the Bronx, and he had like all these crazy stories that sounded like so. And this was before a lot of other things like Rubble Kings and so on. The story was only in Jeff Chang's book, so you Can't Stop, Won't Stop. And so he had all these great stories. We became really friends right away. I mean, we hit it off. I mean, I connected, I guess, personally. My parents are Colombian. I'm also Jewish, so I think this was like a common factor. So we became friends, and he knew everybody. I mean, it was just like he, I know, I was with cool Herc in a gang. Like, really? Yeah, no, he was like, and then turned out, yes, it's true. Our Grandmaster Flash lived down the street. Yes, actually, there was all these things were so absurd that I didn't believe it. And so I turned his story into a graphic novel. And we did for the 40th anniversary a reunion in the Bronx, and he just basically called people up and invited them to like a place in the Bronx. We had like 40, 50 people, and everybody wanted to tell me their stories. Interesting, of course, is if you hear two people telling the same stories, you can have even two different books on this. So, but there were like certain people that were just more credible, like Joseph Mumpa, he former Black Panther activist who became a close friend, Bill Leicht, who was a ghetto brother. So I knew these people for like a decade. They became friends when Yellow Benji, I mean, basically he didn't have like social media. So he asked me, can you create a Facebook page? That's how I met Pete. So he wrote, yeah. So he wanted to connect with him, and I answered. And also, I mean, a lot of these people have been burned many times. I mean, there are people who come, they want to get like one quick story out of it, one, whatever it is, and they disappear. And I think what makes Can You Dig It unique is because there's a whole base of trust. I mean, if you know people for 10 years, they open up to you because they know they can trust you. And I think that's also what Laurie did when she called with her. She really wanted to know, who do you know? How do you know them? What about? So, I think that's really when I think we won her over. And
You were sweating, though. You had sweat on your forehead.
No, because I know.
It was a legitimate background check.
It was, yeah, exactly. And Laurie and I were the same age, so yeah.
I needed to make sure it was authentic and real.
Yeah.
And I can tell because I've been there, and that's one of the things that every now and then Chuck and I joke that sometimes I'm like a secret agent because people who don't know me, like they're like, who's the white innocent looking girl? They have no idea. There's more odds that I will cut someone than anybody else
Fact.
because of my background. But if I can slip in on the low, it's all the much, it's like all the better, right? It's all good.
Yeah, so, and just to get to the unique thing, was like during the pandemic, I got a random like Facebook Messenger message from Angelique Lennox. Had no idea who she is, said, hey, did you do this graphic novel? Can we talk? I was like, who is this? I don't know. And it turned out that her father was Black Benji's half-brother. They had no connection to the stories for decades. They assumed nobody remembered her uncle. And she said, oh my God, you have to talk. And this was even before we said we're doing a podcast. Said, you have to talk to my dad. He had dementia at that time, but we found a day where he was really sharp. It's the first time he went on the record about his brother, and unfortunately passed away a month before the release. So he never even heard it, which
Let's
is
just
really
set the
heartbreaking.
stage,
Yeah.
though, also,
Yeah.
because Black Benji was murdered trying to keep peace. What happened after that was the Getter Brothers were supposed to go back, retaliate, and have blood flow through the streets of the Bronx. That's the next move when it happens. So they actually got together, and they had the Poe Avenue Peace Treaty. And the fact that they brought thousands of kids and they laid down their weapons, that was the moment where sound and art could travel through territories. And without that travel, there's no Herc Party. Without the death of this guy, there's no DJ, which means there's no hip-hop. So this family was like just blown away by this story. And our mission was, again, to bring all these people into the light. And I think she was pretty happy about it.
And, we got even the street renaming was something. There's a school teacher in the Bronx who basically, once, they read the graphic novel, she, with her kids, collected, like, signatures to do the street renaming. And the city said, sorry, you don't have any connection to the family, not going to happen. So Angelique contacted me. I connected her to the teacher. And, 2 months before the podcast came out, the street renaming happened in the Bronx.
Because of the students.
Because of the students. And it was all grassroots kids from the Bronx learning their own history, which was amazing.
Chuck, what was your response, your reaction the first time you started to hear it kind of come together?
People are clamoring for good things, positive things all the time. You look at names on streets and nobody ever questions it, especially New York, with so many names on so many streets, but nobody really ever questions what this name or who this person was, which shows the gap in, in I guess historical and geographical matters. So once you start tying a little seed of that into young people, then it takes on a whole life form of itself. So when it started to come to shore, and Laurie said, "Hey, listen, this is something that this is something that works, and that's when I have to, I have to like, okay, now I'm running the play. Who are the coaches, And so these guys behind here, Laurie's orchestrating, and my job is to remove all ego and do the job and use it as a vehicle through me. And that's what had to take place. I had to say, okay, listen, okay, I know a little bit of the vernacular. I also did like a 7-part series that we did a couple of years ago for The Clash, where I had to learn. I mean, and that was, I needed to get physical therapy after that one, because, you got to learn like, kind of like South London jargon from 1977, and I wasn't there. And I mean, I had to get coached to really kind of read the script 5 different times. This was a little bit closer to home, yet and still I needed, the energy of Pete and Brian, and also knowing what, where Laurie comes from, because I always had that Bronx in my ear. Mm-hmm. It's like, I got to nail this. I got to really seriously, be at that moment from that time, and I got to deliver that. So I was a vehicle. After, how this is going to hook up here, how it's going to be run, what's the story. I mean, the storyline is so detailed. My job was to make it seem like I was telling this story. Since it's only audible, no big pun intended, I got to deliver this like I'm right there at that time. I got to bring 73, 71, 70, 69, 68 right up into 2023. 2024, but it doesn't come without coaching, and it doesn't come with having your ego there at all. You got to be a clear vehicle, right? That's right. And I'll get a line and maybe take it this way, and Peter's like, no, and cool. That's my job. My job is to nail it, and that's what happened with me.
Let's give them a sample of that nail. Please. I have one actually queued up. And again, 2 things had to happen. One, we had to nail it for Audible because we wanted to bring them a hit. But we also were stewards of Chuck D's work. So we had to make sure that we did a good job for him also. This is his brand and his name. So this clip we're about to play is, and we're also representing the family. So think about this. Like, they are cloaked in violent death. That's their legacy. And we're about to go tell it for them. So there's a real burden there to make sure we do a good job. And this clip we're about to play is, it's almost his obituary as told from a journalist from back then, Tony Batten, who did a show called 51st State for a PBS branch in the Bronx. And he basically was their voice. So we basically took his words, gave him the credit. Brian scored the shit out of it. It is amazing. And then Chuck delivered with the voice. We call him the Morgan Freeman of hip-hop. Okay, that's what this guy is. So let's see if we can hit play here. Brandon, I think we got to hit play from up there. And loud, and yeah.
Cornell Benjamin was 25 years old when he was murdered. In the Bronx, in sections like Morrisania, Melrose, Hunts Point, children become men. And still retaining an innocence, remain children long after the time their ages might suggest. In the South Bronx today, death is an ironic but frequent event, and the fist of irony is clenched within the knowledge that death, violent death, is often most heavy here among the poor who may seem to have so little to lose. Here, perhaps because of its frequency, sorrow is never born out of any sense of form. To live in this community today may be to share in an inhuman existence. On these streets, the youth of the South Bronx is molded and educated in the rules of the survival game.
How sick is that?
Brian, talk to us a little bit about the inspiration for the score and how you start to bring all of these different voices.
We call him Grandmaster Brian.
Thank you.
I'm going to skip ahead.
From Chuck, I'll take that all day long. Thank you. That's fine. So, as a composer, you want to find a general palette that's going to help uniquely support the story. And in this case, it also had to transport us back in time. This is very much not a hip-hop score. This is a proto-hip-hop story. So when I thought about the world where these gang kids were living in, to me, it was like the Wild West on pavement, okay? So my mind immediately gravitated towards the classic spaghetti western scores of Ennio Morricone, for instance, as an inspiration point. And then I like to find sort of one instrument that's going to sort of ground us and be our constant, our anchor throughout. And it became this nylon guitar that's throughout. For me, it really brought out the cowboy vibe, but also brought in a Latin vibe, which we needed. And then throughout, there's, going to be different musical cues that are going to signal, different moods, different moments, different characters. You might hear a menacing dobro or a deep baritone guitar, an ominous drone that's going to cue up danger, war. But this is also a story about peace. So having an element like a Chinese bamboo flute is going to help signal and cue hope, moments of hope and peace. And then, in addition to the more tender, dramatic, cinematic score, we also needed some pick-me-up music to kind of move things along. And that's where, we start to bring in elements of funk and soul and Latin,
Kung Fu funk,
which is what you're going to hear right here, and some live drums, some bass, a vibra slap here and there, cowbell, and more cowbell, of course, wah-wah guitar, congos, bongos. It really starts to transport you back in time. Horns. So now you start to really feel like you're being transported back into time, right? Hopefully. So it was a blend of this upbeat stuff and the more tender stuff. And then another key fabric of the music of the show is the music of the Ghetto Brothers. So not only were the Ghetto Brothers a street gang that changed the course of history, they're also amazing musicians, singers, and songwriters. And they were a band. And in 1971, they recorded one record, Power Fuerza, one of the greatest albums you've probably never heard, but go check it out. We wanted to shine a light on that. So at the end of each episode, DJ Chuck D drops the needle on a new track from that record. We play it in its entirety. It plays us out of the episode. So it's a very special element. So the music really, it became a main character. It's a tribute. It's an homage to all those things. Whether it's Latin fusion or spaghettis or 70s kung fu flicks, blaxploitation films. Like it was a melting pot of all of that. But yeah, it's a tribute. And I'll borrow or rip off Ennio Morricone one last time. I'm going to quote him. He said, "There is no great soundtrack without a great story that inspires it." And that was certainly the case here.
That was the greatest description of a score and soundtrack I ever heard in my damn life.
She asked.
Wow.
Yo, I had to make.
I was like,
I had to take up 3 minutes of that montage.
Let's do that again.
I'm like, damn. That's a standard. Everybody should be able to do that.
It was like a 3-minute montage. I had to fill it up, or you'd be really bored.
I have an idea for a podcast. We're going to talk about soundtracks.
There you go.
We actually released it as a soundtrack on Friday. It's out there to be bought, which is a unique thing also we did with Audible. If you listen carefully, there's hints of 70s porn in there. So that's on him. That's not on me. That's osmosis.
Speaking of going for authenticity, that's my segue. How do you ensure that we were getting like these genuine voices, these characters in this cast? Because some of it is scripted. It's not just interview material.
We should go to which one should we go to now? Konzo?
Your call. Go ahead. You
What
drive
was the
it.
question again?
This is authenticity.
Oh yeah, let's go to Konzo. Okay, Julian, you take this, buddy. This is you, guy. Let's hear this first. I have the button.
So set up Joe Conzo,
Okay.
who he is.
That's right. That last some 70s born. So Joe Conzo is a legendary photographer. He took hip hop's baby pictures because he was there. He is it. And he captured so much incredible footage. And he's a great human. And it wasn't until after 9/11 where he was an EMT first responder, where his mother actually found his big box of archives and brought out this treasure trove of those moments in time that would never exist if he didn't bring them out. Cold Crush Brothers, right? Old school B-boys. So part of the revelations of this show was that hip hop is not just one thing. It's not rap. It's 4 elements of the culture. It's the DJ, it's the MC, it's the B-boy, and the aerosol writer. And Joe's camera caught all of that. And we were very lucky to have his voice on the show because he is authentic as it gets. He'll tell you himself, but let's listen to that. Hold on. Shit. Brandon, I think this is you, buddy.
Joe Conzo, the man who took hip-hop's baby pictures, was a young boy growing up in the South Bronx and watched it first through his eyes, then through the lens of his camera.
My name is Joe Conzo. I'm a notable photographer of the hip-hop culture, the Latin music scene, the Bronx scene during its urban decay. I come from a family of community activists. My grandmother was affectionately known as the Hell Lady of the Bronx, Dr. Evelina Antonetti. I always get asked the question, how was it growing up in the Bronx during this time? I thought it was fine. You can't miss anything you never had. So if you didn't grow up in a house with a white picket fence and swings in the backyard, you can't miss it. But if you're growing up in a building where, smack dab in between abandoned buildings and fires going on every day, that becomes the norm, and you make the best out of it.
So, it goes back to the long relationship. So I was fortunate enough that I both knew Yellow Benji and Karate Charlie personally, and they made a lot of the first introductions. So people like Joe Conzo, I met through them. And so I think what we had was really that the people who lived the story introduced us to others who lived the story. And it's interesting now because both Karate Charlie and Yellow Benji are not alive anymore. And people that I've never heard of, in 10, 15 years, come out of the woodwork and tell a new story, but they never have spoken up while these people were still alive, which is kind of all right, where were you 10 years ago? And we see this more and more. And obviously this happens, but when we identified the people, and we were sitting together, or we were on Zoom sitting together, identifying who to invite, I really walked them through, okay, Joseph Mumpa, he was a Black Panther activist. He went to the Ghetto Brothers. He introduced the concept of the peacemaker. We had and that's what he talked about. Interesting enough, the Bronx is such a small microcosm that he also became the first manager of the Cold Crush Brothers. Joe Conzo, his grandmother gave Benji the first job. And, there's all these, connections. It's in a way, it's like a TV show. It's whatever. It's a small, it is. What I love about the Bronx is the arts and culture scene is still very connected. For example, when we went, so Pete wanted to see a jam. I said, Grandmaster Caz is having a jam in the summer. Let's go to the park. We went to Crotona Park, which is one of the parks where actually the model for the Can You Dig It scene in the Warriors movie. And I saw Coke La Rock just standing there. I said, oh, this is Coke La Rock. And nobody, it was just we walked over. I said, hey, we're thinking about doing a podcast. Sure, lucky, you talked to Julian, and it took us 200 hours to track them down and whatever, when do I have to be there? But, it was just the people are still there. And you can find them if you're in the community, and if people in the community also trust you. And, Lucky called me 20 times to make sure, what is this podcast? And so, because people like Coke La Rock have been exploited a lot. And, if you see Coke La Rock was actually the MC, the hype man for DJ Kool Herc. And if you looked at all the Hip Hop 50 events, in 99% of them, he was not even mentioned, which is kind of a shame. And he told us the story of the first party, which, again, was a little bit different than the official narrative. For instance, he was also the DJ at this party. People think he was just a hype man. No, he was not. Coke became a very good friend of ours. it's just nice, and we hope that in a season 2 that he will have a bigger role and really get his voice out. But yeah, the people are still in the Bronx. It's not you can find them, but also you need this base of trust that they talk to you, because they've over the years people come, exploit them, and move on, and we are there to stay, and we want to really tell their stories. I mean, our job was really just to listen. This show is not about us. It's really giving these people a voice. That's really what it's about.
Did you ruffle any feathers with the decisions about who to include or who not to include?
There are some people who strongly expressed to me that they should have been in the show. That always happens. And I mean, when we went to the street renaming, there were a few people from the Ghetto Brothers, or they claimed it were back in the day in the Ghetto Brothers, said, "Oh, that's not true. You should talk to me." I was like, "Well, he is the widow of Yellow Benji." I was like, "Oh, okay, whatever." But yes,
You had a fake jacket on too. Like, come on.
yeah, I mean, I think there were. I mean, we don't have to go into the details, but yes, there are always people who feel like they have to be there. And yes, I'm sure there are other people that maybe if we had more space and whatever we could have included. I think we were very thoughtful with the voices we chose. These are people that I think have a certain authority also in the community, and I think that was very important. But yes, I mean, there are always people that feel maybe they have to be more in the spotlight.
And they're the ones that didn't listen either. We heard a lot of people on social media making comments. I can guarantee you not one of them actually listened to the show, because what they were saying actually is in it.
Well, a lot of times when it comes down to organization and proper curation, either you curate and caretake, or somebody's going to undertake. And usually when it comes down to black culture in this country, black and brown culture especially, the survivors tell the last story, because it ain't going to make the news, it ain't going to be a movie, it ain't going to be no radio show anyway. But things have changed. Things are as far as technologies, they're more available. Everybody's walking around with this gadget, whether you like it or not. You got a gadget that's attached to you that you look as being a member of your family or a new pet, especially these damn trash-ass iPhones. Did I say that? Because they're always readjusting this. I've got to change my cord now into the USB thing, so forgive me on that little diatribe kicking out right now, because it's relevant to the moment with me. But anyway, you have access to all these properties or these tales or these stories. Now, Audible means a lot because you have a device to engage on it. You don't have to run home and turn on a big radio, or if you don't have a car, you don't have a radio system, or if you don't have a box with batteries, you can't. So Audible, the podcast that's happening now, the radio, the television, I should say the filmed and whatever you're checking out, YouTube or Spotify or whatever, there's access to content. And they said content is king, yeah, but the access is also the road to you being able to check it out. You can't make a horse drink water, but but you can actually have it there. So this is where these stories now are starting to say, hey, listen, we're going to find the proper narration, the proper curation, the real story in this, instead of it just floating in the air like myth. Because myth is like yeast. And after a while, it's like, well, you know what? I was there, and I don't believe that. And then everybody wants to interview the survivor. But this is something that caught it right in at the pass. And this story got properly told. And this story plugs into like Fight the Power, which we felt was also properly told through the voices that were there doing it and the voices that were looking over it. So we felt in Hip Hop 50 that it had a thorough bed platform. Now we can start looking at Hip Hop 51 and Hip Hop 52. Like, how about all these other cities that are happening in this country, around the world, if they want to say hip hop? But what's the real story dynamic of hip hop in Southern California and also the Bay Area?
And also the different elements of hip hop, how that story shifts.
Well, the elements like Pete said, turntablism, MCing, graffiti, and dance. But really, come on, dance culture, art culture, vocalization, and musicianship has been has been a part of human beings' culture for thousands of years. Hip hop is just the terminology that starts on that date of August 11th, 1973, at Kool Herc and Coke La Rock's party. Now, we were always creative in the same way, but that's the term that starts on that day. And that day, August 11th, 1973, does not happen without what, Pete?
Peace in the Bronx. Peace in the Bronx. It's pretty amazing, man. This is this is very surreal to me.
The only thing that's missing out of the Bronx that I used to get as a kid, the smells. Yeah, I mean, no, not bad smells. Not bad smells. You go up in an apartment and you smell all kinds of different spices and foods. I mean, you could get full going up into a Bronx or a Harlem building, go up 4 or 5 floors and be like, yo, man, I gotta see what's on the other side of this damn door. That's the thing that doesn't transfer the great smells of people together in community.
But there,
Maybe that's the fifth element.
Smell?
Smell.
I'll take it.
But there is this really wonderful approach in the podcast of really trying to capture just this story through a range of different ways. How did it feel, for each of you, how did it feel the first time you heard it fully come together?
I can't hear myself. As soon as I hear my voice, I all of a sudden cancel it out. So I always think, oh, man, turn this shit off. But it just cancels out. But everything else sounds great.
I'm going to jump in. We were involved in, the scripting and authenticity, and these guys did all the heavy lifting, but making sure it was accurate. And, as they've already said, I vetted them to make sure we had all the right people involved. But to actually hear it, because I wasn't involved in that part of it, so they would be sending me stuff, I was completely floored. I mean, you hope you pick the right partners to make something, but until it's made, do you really know if people have delivered? And I was incredibly proud, and more than proud, I knew that we had told a story that, was very much like, myth to people who were growing up in the Bronx. People knew it at that time, but to have it all come together and to hear it, I felt like we really nailed it, and I was really proud of all of the work the guys had done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, also creating was really it was basically changing all the time because we did the interviews, and every interview something new happened. So we didn't know the end product as we were doing it because every conversation brought something new. For me, I think the best moment was when Wanda, the widow of Yellow Benji, and Angelique, the niece of Black Benji, both said, wow, this is really wonderful. And I mean, Angelique was crying, I was crying, we were all like, wow. And this is really what it was all about, that they feel great. And job done. I mean, once they were happy, I'm happy.
Look, I mean, this is a story that pulls on a lot of different emotions and heartstrings. It starts out very dark, and it ends hopeful. So as storytellers, we certainly had a duty to the story, to the unsung heroes, to the family members, to our cast, to the casting process, to our crew, to our luminaries who offered commentary, to the Bronx, to the culture. We had a lot of duties there, and to get a review like that from Lori means a lot because she lived it. She knows this. So we really needed to create those emotions as storytellers, and for this really to hit the way that we wanted to, because it is a really emotional story. It's very dramatic, but it's a beautiful story too. And that's what we really wanted to try to achieve.
I think we celebrated the achievement of 50 years of hip hop, but we honored the pain of its beginning. To me, it was an emotional ride. I mean, we had 18 cast members which we casted from on the ground in the Bronx and in Soho, and then throughout some of the our principals from SAG. But a lot of the cast was right there from the Bronx. People who just wanted a break or needed to learn how to speak on a mic, and they had to deliver. But we found a lot of diamonds in the rough, and it was really exciting to watch them come to the set and in the studio and put down the words. I think for me, I had two feelings. One was relief because we promised something really cool and big, and then we had to deliver on that. And this is my first rodeo, so like, holy shit, we got to deliver on this. And then we did. And then I was really proud. I remember sitting down in my back room and just listening to the interviews and the music underneath it, and listening to Henry Chalfant, who is he's the Obi-Wan Kenobi of hip hop. And just hearing him talk to me from questions that I asked him, like, just blew my mind. So I'm going to play a clip just so you guys can kind of hear how some of the scripted stuff came together. We're a little out of order, so I got to find it.
Joke.
Oh, that's not it here. Okay, this right here is it's a cold open for episode 2 when Yellow Benji has to run through the Apache line. That's the initiation line. That's when you run through a major ass kicking just to belong to something. That's how it was back in the day. You went through that line of a beatdown, and at the end of that was a family and a structure and hope within your little community. But I think when you listen to it, every single sound is a unique sound. This is not a video. This is audio. Every single sound is a unique piece of work. And to have it, you'll hear it. It's in the head of Yellow Benji as he goes through this line. So, like, this is the kind of work that Brian and his team put together. And it really was just, again, going back to pride, but also relief. I can hit play on this, I think.
Come on, young blood.
Come on, Benji. You got this. You got this. You are a Kofon cat. You are a Kofon cat. Come on. You wanna watch the kids? I need you here. The children need you.
Benji, I need you to watch your siblings, okay? I'll be back in a few.
Benji, if you don't tell me, I'm gonna tell Mommy left to school. Victor, you need to stay here and watch Sarah. Don't tell Mom about any of this. She'll kill me.
Come on, young blood. Come on, look up. Square up. Let's go. Take it. Done.
About to give up.
Hit him again.
Ready for the whole cat?
Come on.
Okay, get up. Come on. It's over. You made it, Benji.
Come on, saying. I did it.
Good job. You're one of us. You're a Kofon cat.
I would just say to that, like, my kids, to belong to something, they try out for a team and they make a team. These kids have to do that to belong to something. And last Thursday in New York City, the Empire State Building was yellow for Wu-Tang. Okay? We're talking about going from Staten Island, the slums of Shaolin, to the lights of the Empire State Building. That's what I'm talking about when I say underdog. That's some serious shit.
Considering how saturated the market is for viewable things, movies, TVs, not to mention streaming, and then just how many podcasts there are, how do you get ears on this project?
I mean, it's a lot of labor. It's you have to be relentless in this environment because there are, like Chuck was saying, there are lots of places to watch it, devices to watch it on. Everyone's in competition. There's saturation. There's pollution of content, but it's relentless, and it's PR, and it's doing things like this, and it's also being a good person because you want people to root for you. That's the undercurrent, is having a fan base at home and out here. So, it's not easy. The hard part is getting it made. The harder part is getting it heard. So, and it's getting heard. I mean, Audible, I don't know if you guys are here, but we have no numbers on this, but we've earned, I think, almost 700 million earned media impressions of PR. And then our social outreach has been incredible, working with Chuck's team, our team, Audible, the Grammy Museum. I mean, everyone we're working with, it's just like a collaboration and just getting out good content and also not being annoying, right? I think that's also huge. I have trouble being not annoying, but I get it, though. I understand.
And we picked up 5 Signal Awards. Signal Awards is a big deal in the audio world for anybody who doesn't understand that. So, so people are starting to recognize, and it's nice to be recognized. It's nicer to have people listen and actually appreciate it and really enjoy it.
It's the only story of its kind. And when I always address people, I'm like, hey, you love hip-hop? And they say, yeah, I do. Well, it behooves you to know thoroughly about what you say you love.
What was your takeaways from the podcast? Did you learn anything new?
I learned everything new in reading the script. I mean, what it did is like it answered questions that were always lingering. Okay, yeah, we knew the overview of this is what happened to the Bronx, and I had cousins, and this is what came out of the Bronx. I'm there at the same time. I'm there in real time. Yeah. But how did it happen to the detail? So as I'm going through the script, and then, Pete basically like, yo, this happened. He's pretty much reassuring what Laurie been saying all her life. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. This makes Laurie even more legit. So, so then the pressures were on me to like, listen, I don't want to be the guy that F's this up now, because now everybody else is a superstar. Now, it only takes Chuck to F it up, so I got pressure on me to come through for these folks.
I don't think anybody thought you were the weak link in the chain.
Not a weak link.
It's not easy though, but it's not easy. But like I said, you have to pay attention to the coaching, and you have to nail the vernacular and the moment. And in this story it could so easily be missed because it has been missed. It's been, a miss out of the information. So you got to make it detailed. But one thing we do agree, it's the only game in town as far as this story being told. Mm-hmm. So it's not getting mixed up with this, that, and the other, 8 people saying the same story about something that kind of existed. No, this is nailing it to the frame as a prequel, a prelude to the thing that we all say, oh, we love it. It's Hip Hop 50. We love it. Okay. How about this?
Look, when I did grow up in the Bronx then, and I remember when the Warriors came out and I was a little kid and have an older sister, and we thought, wow, this is like this weird Disneyland version of where we live, but it's the closest thing to where we live, so we're going to embrace it anyway. But it was very much like this, Disney version, even though for some people who, grew up in a different way than us, the Warriors seems really hardcore, and I understand. But and we knew that it was kind of based on the Black Benji, Yellow Benji story. But of course, it's like the Hollywood version, and they have the girl in it, and the thing, and whatever, and the radio announcer. But still, again, it was the closest thing. So then, when you have something that's really authentic and real, which is why it was so important before we signed on to it that these guys were legit, because it is a really important story, and it did create peace and movement around the South Bronx and the Bronx in general. Not that gangs went away. It was just like you allowed people to move freely. And to just give you guys some context, there were hundreds of gangs. There was like a gang for almost every street. Like, you couldn't leave your block. Think about it. You couldn't leave your block. If you left your block, you could, and people didn't really have guns, but still you could die anyway. It was baseball bats was usually the thing. But you couldn't leave your block for fear that you would be skulled, is what it was called. So think about that. So this is the things that are so important, and to also show where when people think about the South Bronx then, they think about like a bunch of animals who didn't, deserve anything. But the fact of the matter is, poverty created all of these things. Or as I like to say, we were so poor we couldn't even afford the word poverty. Like, it just was what it was. But then you go and you find joy that this story allows, because there's a peace movement, and then it allows things like block parties to happen and people to kind of move around, and Anna, or as Joe Conzo said, for those of us who live there, it wasn't awful to us, it just was. But again, the authenticity, the story is so important, and I hope that you guys embrace it and will tell people to listen to it, because it's just an important story, and these people shouldn't be forgotten.
So for two of you, both of you having been there, thinking about this transition from like analog days of handmade flyers and mixtapes to today and podcasts and streaming, how do you tell the stories that you know still need to be told? How do you?
Well, quickly, I don't want to, because I want these guys to talk. Chuck and I started a production company, and we've been making stuff. And the reason why we did it, not because we needed another job, because we have many jobs. It was because we wanted to tell important stories well, with quality and authentically, and we don't want these stories to be forgotten. So whether it's Can You Dig It, which we think is a really important story, which is why we signed on and helped these guys bring it across the finish line, or Fight the Power, or some of the other stuff we're making now, or the other things, whether it's the Clash or the Knicks. We want to tell important stories accurately and authentically, because we've also seen many other docs where we've also been a party to that are not told properly. They're not accurate. They don't do the artist a service. They don't do the culture a service. We answer to the culture. We answer to the artist. We answer to the people. That's the shit we want to make and are making.
There are a couple more questions, and then we have a little bit of time for Q&A. So if folks are thinking about maybe asking a question, start to formulate it now. So when it comes time, you can just jump in. Just thinking about the what next of things. There are a few different questions I can ask, but really, like, not only what next project-wise, what are you working on next, but also what do you think needs to happen next with hip hop? We have this year of celebration, and then there's an after. So where do our attentions need to shift in the after?
Well, Hip Hop 51 is important.
Yeah.
And we thought Hip Hop 48 and 49 was important. We didn't come into Hip Hop 50 like, okay, what do we do? At the top of the year, and I've said this before, we were even discussing it in this building. We laid the groundwork, I think, for the high discussion of hip hop and what it was to the world and what it came out of, what it was saying, straight out of the artists and all the contributors' mouths. And as far as multimedia and future media, I really don't get in the way of this lady, because she understands it politically, and also in the area of the boardrooms, to be able to understand that they just cannot come to the culture and just flick a switch on and be part of the culture. Because I'm in the back. That's why I'm in the background with my baseball bat. I'm not going to the boardroom. I'm not having negotiations across. I think, company, you need to. No, I'm be like, if you can't deal with Laura, you definitely, I'm in the background. You got to treat this culture and the people that the culture comes out of, you got to treat it right. You cannot F that up. Because if you F that up, number one, you're not coming out of that conference room right. And she knows what to do. She has that language. But also she has the creative language in that world, which I previously be like, I don't know. I'm not going to make no film. I'm not going to get into visuals. I'm a music guy. I'm like in the, like in the Brian Master zone of whatever. But these things in the future require that you squad up and be a great assembly line of contributors and people to make new media travel in new ways to new human beings and these new technologies. So you have to be able to come up out of yourself and say, okay, what's my position? And if this is my position, do the rest of y'all have your positions down? And that's how we go about it, which opens me up to say, now we're going to get involved with a lot of different narratives of the culture and the art. I'm a culturalist, right? So I stop, the buck stops with me. I'm a culturalist. I'm an artivist, artivist, because I'm an artist, And with my art, it has been active. It's not all the art I do, but it's active in my art, what I'm known for. And then afterwards, there's accountability and responsibility, and that comes with a team. So that's where Hip Hop 51 is with us. It's like, how much more can we be revolutionary as things become evolutionary?
Thank you.
I would just say on top of that, you have to obviously innovate and continue to storytell where the water travels. But we also need to stay where we are. This story is evergreen. Struggle is agnostic. You can relate to this story. You can empathize with it. And there are a lot of people that can't hear it. So we're trying to get this into schools, more museums. If you're in the projects, you can't probably download Audible and pay for the month. So how are they going to hear that if this reflects their life? How are they going to find inspiration and see that you can actually get out of something, even though no one's going to help your ass? So I think we got to go forward. We have to also stay where we are and go deeper. Because as cool as this is, there's still a lot more work to do.
Thank you. So we do have some time for a couple of questions. I can't. So I see two hands. This person, I can't tell.
Do you need a mic? Oh, as far as typing, all the time. Every day, all day. Or ChatGPT, we don't really mess around with that just yet. But I type every day.
Okay, thank you. Yes, in the back.
First of all, I really, really enjoyed the story, the message. As somebody who grew up in the Bronx adjacent, also known as Connecticut.
Jason, for real.
It really did hit outside of those urban areas and really had an impact. Terrific story. I guess my question is, as we sit here in 2023, we talk about outlaw culture. In 2073, 50 years from now, can we point to, dare I say, a hip-hop artist right now, and this is for anybody really, that you could point to that's sending that message, or a group? And I know this is far beyond the music, but I'd like to pose that question to you as somebody who can, or not somebody.
No. The answer is no. But what will form to be some, number one, I'm not going into 2073 at all. We don't know what 2024 is looking like in this country right now. I mean, really? I mean, we got so many real things to take care of before we figure out where culture is going to be. Anyway, let me not digress. I think in hip hop and rap music as a genre and a culture, its best movement comes when it's a collective, not a soloist. So I don't think a Bob Marley is going to pop up out of hip hop and rap music. I think up to a certain point, up to negotiations with record companies, where they reduce the collectives into soloists, then some of that real change and power, hearing a lot of voices work together, started to disappear. That's the beautiful thing about Can You Dig It, because it's dealing with a dynamic array of individuals coming together as a collective to make it, talking about a movement of a collective in a community that was happening at the time that makes us talk about this story. So in hip hop, it has been reduced to, solo recording artists, and that's why we talk about administrators could kind of get a total narrative of all the diversity within. But it's starting to form together by default. If you checked out the Grammy performances, just recently we did something, filming for next year as a Grammy addendum to the Hip Hop 50, and that was administered by a bunch of creative heads and administrative heads.
It airs in December on
CBS.
CBS.
Yeah, airs in December on CBS. But LL Cool J and Questlove of the Roots are two significant figures that worked on heading it up as administrators instead of just like, we're just getting down. And that's very important.
And we had a hand on it. We put some names in. I mean, we needed to make sure. Look, one of the things to answer your thing earlier is, hip hop has suffered from so many challenges. The obvious racism one, but the other one is genreism. There's still a lot of, the music industry is still controlled by a lot of old white dudes who think unless it has a guitar and a bass and drums and a bunch of traditional vocalists that it's not music. And that's just the truth. And that's something we're always fighting against and gonna be for a while. So to me, I think the challenge is in the next, we're not gonna make it another 50 years unless there's some super thing, but the challenge is to keep pushing forward and showing that this is a really important, and nobody thought it'd go 50 years. Go ahead.
I like to just cap it off and seriously close the door, because seriously, 2024 on forward, if women ain't running 75% of anything, religion, government, structures, it's a wrap. No big pun intended. I do radio shows. We have the Rap Station Radio Network. Everywhere around the world, women are 34 to 35% of all of the output of hip hop. When you talk about women output in hip hop in the United States, it's like, well, we gonna talk about, Saweetie and, Meg Thee Stallion and Cardi B's beef with Nicki, and that's it. It's like women are really around the world 40% of the producers, record label owners, collectives,
other
artists, activists, organizers, administrators. If that doesn't change, hip hop ain't going nowhere. It's just too duded out. It's Penitentiary 5. It came. Listen, the male voice came at a particular time, especially the young black male voice came at a particular time where it was just nowhere. So therefore, it emerged. It emerged through. It wasn't love songs. It wasn't crooning. We couldn't get it mixed up with Shaka and Whitney. It was just like, it wasn't like Luther. This was like, it wasn't the Four Tops. This was somebody like, don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm screaming at y'all. So that was a particular time where that voice was necessary to scream out in the world, like, recognize what the fuck I am and what is going on. Cool. That's cool. Alongside it, women have a voice and a narrative that has been squashed into this small hole, like, yeah, croon to us, or, just keep doing those nice songs. And when you talk about, rapping, just see if you make sure you got a dude that makes sure that your rap is right, or you can compete. And that shit's over with. I'm telling you. So the future of not only hip hop, the future of government, the future of religion, the future of businesses, the future, if women ain't at least 60 to 75% of everything, it's a fucking rap.
We're doomed.
I'm serious. It's a rap. And that's it. So that's to me up to 2073. That's it.
Connecticut, Bronx adjacent.
How are we on time? Any time for an additional questions?
One more.
One more
for these guys.
Who's got
a question?
I see many hands. You've been yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm Bridget. I'm from Switzerland. I'm hosting a radio show about rap. I'm sorry for my English. Maybe it's not really perfect, but
I understand.
I wanted to know if maybe, because in my region we speak French, so I wanted to know if maybe there will be a translation about this podcast or something.
It's a great question. Julian's, I don't know how many
Chuck,
books you
how's
have.
your French?
How many books do you have?
Graphic novels?
Yes.
16.
He's got 16 books. I think all of them are also translated into
Well,
other
actually,
languages.
the Ghetto Brother came out in French first before it came out in English, because people in the US thought like it's not really, there's no market for it. Very niche. But it came out in France in 2014 first. So
It's a great question.
But
But
yeah,
if Audible's here, that's a question for them.
we would love to.
We'll get back to you
Yeah.
on that.
I think you have, I also come from France also. I think you have amazing French rappers from that time as well, who initiated a lot of wonderful things in the hip hop culture of the 80s and the 90s. And I don't know, I'm just going out of there. Maybe one of them might be thrilled to actually maybe
Well, we have an arc. This series has an arc. It starts with war, it moves to peace, it goes to party, and then it heads over to Europe. Right? That's the arc.
And you want to, and right now, where we're at in 2023, going into 2024, that you want to be able to have the living element be able to tell a story as a breathing, living element that tells different stories in different languages. However, just like we have the gadget to our side and our hip, artificial intelligence is not going backwards. It's going forward. So you might even hear fluent Arabic even or whatever with my voice. I mean, I'm not saying that will happen, but we're at that stage right now. And by 2025, the way deepfakes are going, the way voice appropriation is going, the way a whole bunch of different things are going in technology. I mean, well, number one, I dance with AI and technology because that's the business that we're in. But the thing that's bugging me out right now, just in hip hop, the DOC, a good friend of mine, right? The DOC lost his voice in an accident, like 35 years ago, maybe 30. Yeah, Trey lost his voice about 30 some odd years ago in an accident out here in California, and he talks like this, and his voice has come back only up to that level. The other day, for the last couple of months, artificial intelligence engineers have been able to take the vernacular of the DOC going in the studio, doing it in his same style that he would write and be on the mic, and then artificial intelligence taking his voice from 1991, no one could do it better, and then putting it with the style he was just on the mic, and you being able to say, well, that's DLC. So this is what I'm saying, surprises, we're always gonna be surprised about something. So the way that we're receiving information and we're looking at documentaries and hearing documentaries and stories and movies and unfortunately, you know, presidential or government and political or religious dogma that might come through, it's going to be hard to be able to figure out what is what. Yeah. But that's another story for another time. But that's why when you start asking questions about the future, it's an unbelievable rabbit hole in 2023. Understand. But we'll still be creative. Right. We'll be creative as hell, and always try to say that truth will prevail in the stories that we're involved in.
Thank you all very much for your time, for your labor.
Thank you.
This was awesome. Thank you to the Grammy Museum. Thank you all for coming out.
Can we say a couple quick thank yous from PB&J? So first of all, to the Grammy Museum, thank you for hosting us. This is an honor. Dr. Imani Johnson, thank you very much for moderating tonight. Lori Bula, thank you for taking a chance on us and trusting us. And Chuck, thank you for being our voice of authenticity. And thank you all for coming out tonight to support us. Check out Can You Dig It on Amazon Music or Audible. And if you want to see what we've all been up to over the last year or so, hit us at Can You Dig It Official on Instagram and say hi. Thank you.